Ladies and gentlemen, we have a race. Let's talk presidential candidates on the Midweek Update. Okay, let's talk election candidates. Here's what you need to know. Basically, we now have the 2024 presidential election candidates. We're gearing up for a grim rematch this year. Trump has won the New Hampshire primary on top of the Iowa primary. I think I read the blurb that he is the first Republican to win both of those. Don't quote me on that. You guys know I'm weak in terms of politics, better on economy and markets. And of course, Joe Biden, projected winner in the New Hampshire primary. So we're set for the rematch. And already you are starting to see stocks move and the market move. And I actually want to get a little bit ahead of this effect. So what I'm showing you here on the chart, this is Geo Group. They basically run for-profit prisons. And Geo Group is starting to move. And one of the reasons why I think it's starting to move is because we know what the 2024 election is going to be. We quote unquote know that Donald Trump is going to win. And we quote unquote know that if Donald Trump wins, then he's going to have to do something about illegals. And therefore, we quote unquote know that he's going to take the illegals and start putting them in for-profit prisons, and that's going to benefit Geo Group. Now, I used so many quote unquotes there to help give you a sense of how many assumptions are being made based upon a future that is uncertain and hasn't come yet. In much the same way, we can also see it here. This is Fanny May. Fanny May is a government-backed mortgage guarantor. They've been in conservatorship with the U.S. government since basically 2008, 2009. And if you notice here, Fannie Mae, it doesn't trade on an exchange anymore. It only trades OTC because essentially this business is bankrupt. All of its profits are going towards the U.S. government. But Fannie Mae has recently moved from 40 cents a share to $1.43 a share because we quote unquote know Donald Trump is going to win, and quote unquote we know that he's going to release the GSEs, which is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, from conservatorship. And so these businesses are going to be wildly profitable at some point in time in the future. What this looks like to me a whole bunch of putting the cart before the horse. And you want to be careful about this, and that's why I wanted to talk about this topic today. I went back and I looked at the 2020 election, the Biden basket versus the Trump trade. And I think if you saw what was being recommended in a Biden win, this would give you caution about chasing these quote unquote presidential pet projects, I would call them. In a Biden trade, if Biden won, the thought was that EVs were going to take over the world, so buy a whole bunch of EV stocks. There was some thought that the trade war with China was going to abate, so buy a whole bunch of Chinese stocks. And what we know from November of 2020 to where we are today, and certainly from Biden's inauguration to today, both of those things would have been a disaster. The EV market has pretty much been a disaster since November of 2020, since the election, and China's been even bigger disaster. In the EV markets, even the best EV stock, Tesla, is pretty much flat from that point in time to now, while the stock market, the S&P 500, is significantly higher. So these were bad trades. So this is a little different. Remember that we talked about regulation change not that long ago. I think regulation change is something real and realistic that you can potentially invest in. Regulation change looks like both sides of government coming together and executing policy. What I'm talking about here are presidential pet projects, and I think these things are very dangerous. This is very different from regulation change. This is, we know what the future is going to be. We know what the future is going to be in terms of what the president does, and we know what the future is going to be in terms of what businesses are going to win. It's a nuance, but it's very different than regulation change than what we talked previously. So we have our candidates. What does it all mean? Well, we're reasonably certain what the 2024 election is going to look like. It's a grudge match. It's going to be a pretty big fight. Already, we are starting to see market movements based on what I would call presidential pet projects. And in my experience, these things have been traps. So there is not a Biden portfolio, there is not a Trump portfolio, and we don't invest that way. I think if you do that, you're going to get yourself in some trouble. And finally, and this is the most important one, and this works in election years, not election years. This one works at all times. Don't mix your politics and investing. I know it's hard as the U.S. continues to get more and more polarized, but you just don't do it. That includes things like hey, I don't like this founder because he votes one way or another. And that includes things like, oh, hey, my guy or the guy I don't like is going to get in, and therefore we need to make some portfolio changes. That stuff, in my experience, historically, I think if you were to look at the record, doesn't tend to work. So there you are. I'll see you for the weekend review. Take care.